Hey everyone, my name is Swaroop. Thank you so much for coming this morning. I know we had an after party, so I was not expecting many people to show up today for the first talk, but glad to have you all here. I had a very sort of a technical presentation, but I'm trying to figure out how much I want to share. So let me gauge at least the IRL audience. I know some of you are watching this remotely. How many of you have worked in, or at least, used DeFi, decentralized finance? Okay, awesome. That's like a few hands. Okay, which of the apps on DeFi have you used, like some common names that you could share? No, Uniswap, Aave, like most pop. Oh, those shall not be spoken of on the stage. I will. I actually had a small comment about it in a very indirect way. I was trying not to, burn people down when they are, well, they're down. But yeah, that's fun. Okay, so to those who don't know what DeFi is, I know there's also a lot of new folks who have come in here to learn about Web3. So DeFi stands for decentralized finance. Now, to put it in perspective, it's basically a trustless system with no middlemen in financial applications. For example, so I'm also new to Canada. I moved about, I think, 7 or 8 months ago. But the way the banks treated me, I was like 18 years old or like a minor, right? They would not give me even a bank account easily and forget about getting credit cards and loans and stuff like that. That's like, it's going to take years. That's what someone told me, right? Now, you must have all experienced this at different parts of your life, when you're a student. You've come from a different country, and unfortunately, sometimes even of a different skin color, right? They do sometimes judge you, in spite of all those disclaimers that they put outside. Now, DeFi does not judge anyone. It doesn't care who you are, which country you're from, and sometimes not even sanctions. If you're from certain countries that a lot of people are not aware of, they can't even access certain online services. Like I have so many friends in Iran who sort of face this, right? So that's, in a nutshell, what DeFi does. Of course, it's super, super complicated. I don't want to go through, that would probably be a 30-minute talk. The reason I bring this up is because it's become the most popular sort of use case for Web3. Because it has essentially enabled people to do things that are sometimes not even possible in traditional financial applications. So, and to back up a little bit, when we were building a developer tool about a couple of years ago, so we had been building it for 4 years. And at a hackathon, we actually presented this. So so anyone who's sort of hacking at this hackathon, do keep in mind, you can build a lot of cool things. And I was actually presenting, I think online was one and a bunch of people. It was HackaFest. It was probably the first Filecoin hackathon. And we had this sort of a side idea. It's kind of ironic. It was just a use case that I was presenting just to test what we had in mind. And yeah, here we are today. We have been working on this protocol for a good 1.5 years. And to give you sort of a brief overview, what we do is we aggregate snapshots from on-chain data. So it's actually not just focused on DeFi. Today, I'm just going to show you a DeFi example. That's why I brought it up. But we aggregate all this data, turn it into something that people can consume. They don't need centralized indexers, querying systems, and none of those things, right? Because you'd be wondering, like, isn't DeFi already decentralized? It is, but what happens is when you need complex data sets from it, especially historical data, or you're trying to run numbers like analytics, or like just trying to understand, simple charting. So I'll give you an example of this is Uniswap is this protocol, which is essentially I would say the most used DeFi app. It's essentially to swap tokens, but if I were to explain you, it's like the most transparent way to, let's say, buy stocks in the real world, right? So in a Web2 world, what would you have to do? You'd have to go on different platforms, and you could get locked out. Here, none of that things, right? So if there is enough liquidity and you set the right price with whatever slippage and all those things, you will be guaranteed for that transaction to happen, and you can verify that on-chain. Now, of course, that is a very simple app that they have, but from there, all of these analytics have to be done, right? So this is their page, and this is a lot of complex indexing that's done, and at the moment, a lot of, I would say, centralized systems that are being used, and with a combination of some decentralized technologies. And we realized that while we were building PowerLoom, we could actually solve this in a much better way. So before I sort of show you what we have built, which is essentially equivalent of this, let me give you sort of a quick overview of what we essentially do. So yeah, so we take all these data sources. Essentially, there could be any smart contract on, as of today, it's mostly on EVM chains, but it's not restricted to that because we essentially treat everything as a data source. And we select an epoch. It's done in using a consensus. And from there, what we use is some sort of a curation framework that allows you to, for all the people who are sort of in the network, to transform this data, clean this up, and turn it into this sort of a snapshot, which I'll show you during the demo. And it passes through what we call internally our audit protocol. And this, if you actually go through our GitHub, was literally the first thing we built 2 years ago. So that commits this snapshot onto a decentralized storage platform, because obviously we can't store that back on chain. So we use IPFS for what we call is hot storage, so that anyone can sort of pull that data. But what we also do is we use Filecoin to do archival storage, because long-term IPFS is, there's no incentive for us to keep pinning those files. And hopefully some of you went through a talk on, I don't want to explain how pinning works, but essentially think of it like an S3, and then you have another backup through like AWS Glacier or something, but of course in a more decentralized way. And then we commit this proof of the snapshot. So the difference is that how do you know that the data was committed at a certain time, right? So that's why we actually end up using a chain. In this case, we sort of took an open source solution. And as I'm told, as of 8 minutes ago, I believe FVM has gone live, so we might actually switch to that. But for today's demo, I will not be using that. And we commit that, we get a transaction back, so you can actually check that proof on chain. And then we sort of connect this as like, think of it like an anchor point for our snapshots. And we have metadata blocks. We actually also use something called IPLD. I don't know if it was covered in the last couple of days, but we use that as like a linked list of, if any of your CS grads, you'll understand what that means, right? So we sort of use that to put snapshots in a particular order. And then that can be constantly verified. So all of this is happening in some sort of a consensus. So it's, today I'll be showing an example of how I'm just doing this on a single sort of a node or a computer. And most of you should be able to do this once we announce this to the public. And this process continuously works, right? So we are constantly sort of indexing that data, maybe transforming further information around it, and then preserving the state. Because this data is always on IPFS, so even if the system, let's say one of the services goes down, somebody else can still pull that information, right? And then because thanks to magic of what I call is math in crypto, you know that for a certain identifier, that snapshot data still contains that same information. Okay, enough of this is all I'm going to do from a technical perspective. I promised I won't go too technical. Okay, so let's look at, so this was the demo that this was the live Uniswap page. And what we have attempted is just a very early version of it using our protocol. This is the first set of eyes that are looking at this since we've been working on at least, I would say this one for the last 3 to 4 months. And it's, let's do a refresh and so that it pulls the latest data. Okay, so as you can see, it's instantly ready to go because there is no querying. There is no database that you're fetching it from. It's already been snapshotted because that's how we have designed. Our approach is a little different from some of the other providers that you might have used in the past, but you essentially still get the same data. It's much more verifiable. So let's actually try to inspect this on IPFS right now. So sometimes, oh, it actually loaded pretty quickly. That's nice. So you can actually inspect the same data that let me try to zoom this in, which I'm showing you here, and compare that it's the same thing. So let's say even if this sort of a front-end website goes down, you can still pull this from many different sources. And of course, we want people to run multiple versions of this so that we're not dependent on one centralized party, right? Because then it beats the purpose of everything we're doing. So we are tracking tokens. We're tracking all of these 189 smart contracts. So there's a lot of data that's being snapshotted at every sort of, I believe we have set an epoch of 40 blocks right now, because that's just too much for people to even understand what's going on every few seconds. But eventually we can do this in real time as well. So if any of you have like a favorite pair or a token, feel free to name one and I'll try to look it up. Which one? Any token. ETH, okay. I believe they have a concept of wrapped ether, right? So you can see the price, so that's also being calculated in a decentralized way, so you can also trust this rather than some centralized exchange that will give you the price. Of course, this is always on Uniswap too, but this is like a historical volume that you can see And then you can make a decision if you want to be a liquidity provider. There's something that you might want to look into how Uniswap and others work. So cool. Yeah, so that was sort of a demo. And all of this, as I said, you can, again, inspect this also on IPFS. Every snapshot is being pulled, so if I refresh this and a new one comes in, you can sort of inspect that as well. There is also a proof that we are sort of committing on chain. I think our Explorer is currently private, so I'm not able to show, but the RPC is something that's open, so you can sort of verify that that proof has been stored, and hopefully we'll be using a public one. Sorry, that was my timer for 10 minutes. Okay. So coming back to just a sort of a final thing, so I was going to explain about how complex things are, but it's too technical there. So this is sort of our master plan. It's not as extensive as one's Filecoin master plan, but this is what we've been meaning to do. If you go to our website, you can see the exact same thing. So as of today, I would say we are somewhere here. We are allowing people to sort of snapshot this data. We haven't opened it up to everyone. We haven't open sourced it. So today is like our first preview of what we are doing. But in this quarter, I would say, so since we are already in Q3, we'll be opening it up to external snapshotters. So anyone in this room should be able to use even your regular computer to do exactly what I'm doing today and take part in the network. And once we have once we are sort of ready with our incentive mechanism, because as of today, of course, there's no incentive, so we will probably subsidize some of the costs for you. But once the what we call as the DAO that goes live, you'll be able to get rewarded for the work that you do. And also at the same time, like our final sort of, it's probably going to happen sometime next year, is if you're a developer, you can actually build these use cases too. So today we are seeding the market with these use cases. So I gave you an example of how Uniswap one works. It's a very complex one, to be honest, because it's actually a mix of about 180 different use cases merged into one. But you could be building parts of it, or you could be curating some other lending platform like Aave, and working with realistic stablecoins, not the one we just talked about when the talk started, right? So you can sort of monitor that, and if there is enough demand in the market, then people will want to use your curation and sort of snapshot, and there are people who will be willing to obviously consume that data. So that way you can actually even get rewarded for that. You don't have to run this whole system. You can just be a smart person who knows how to write this sort of logic. Of course, this is like it's our long-term strategy, so everything's going to happen in time. But yeah, we're excited to, first of all, I'm very excited to show this to somebody after like a year and a half of us being in research and development. And I think I have just maybe a minute or two to take questions. Otherwise, I'm so thankful that you all showed up today. Yes?
Any application that you can see in relation to oracles that can be
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Our first prototype was like an Oracle purpose. We decided we didn't want to get into that space because there's so many. So this was something we built with Gitcoin way back, like I think our very, very first one, probably December 2020. So we were tracking data from off-chain data, right? So if it's on a database and things. The problem was mathematically, it's difficult to verify because in the end, we will become Chainlink. Then there's no difference between us and Chainlink, and there's, like they have a bigger community, what's the point, right? Like our focus is on the approach, so we realize that on-chain is where, like if you actually go to our website, it still says that, if you sort of read through that. It says on-chain and off-chain data, but yeah, we might sort of allow people to mix it up if necessary, because like we are also struggling with how do you get the US dollar value. Like I was trying to show this on the demo, right? How do we show the US dollar value? Because it's so complicated. So right now, we just compare it against trades against USDC so that it's not dependent on any off-chain data. But I believe most of the protocols end up using some sort of an oracle to pull it. But hopefully, if we can do things like this, maybe somebody will come up with it. If the network goes live, then it's completely up to people, right? If they think that this is good enough to run and we are doing something different than Chainlink, then maybe people will use it for it. But yeah, thanks for asking that. Anything else? No? Good. Please do check us out on PowerLoom.io. I believe we'll be putting up the linking to this, the demo, the code in this coming month. You can join our Discord if you want to learn more what we are up to and get more updates. Thank you so much.